Hello and welcome to Sunday School for February 21st, 2021. This is, I think, Old Testament 3.2. Old Testament survey is 3.2. We are going to be in the book of Ruth. Before we jump into that, a few announcements. First and foremost is that you can sign up for RYM on our website, TrinityPCA.org. And you can find different websites both for the high school conference and the middle school conference. And I'll do the work of putting that up here in the editing part, so you'll be able to see it right here, where you can go, the links, and where you can go to sign up. But please sign up for RYM if you'd like to come with us. Invite a friend. We'd love to take as many as we can. So that out of the way, small groups are up and running on Wednesdays. Fellowship is back tonight. So we've got everything going like we normally would, or like it's been since the beginning of last year. So those are our announcements, I guess. Other than that, again, we're going to be looking at the book of Ruth and a few different passages in the book of Ruth. So if you have your Bibles, you can go ahead and turn there. And with that in mind, let's get right into the lesson. We're going to read two passages from Ruth chapter 1 to start today. The first one is Ruth 1, and we'll read the first 5 verses of the book. This kind of sets the scene, the context for where we find Ruth and what's going to happen to her. So this is kind of setting the scene. This is Ruth chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. It says, "In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. And a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other, Ruth. They lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband." That's Ruth 1, 1 to 5. I also want to flash forward to verses 15 to 18. And then we'll talk a little bit about it. So look at verses 15 and 18 in Ruth chapter 1. It says, "And she said," this is Naomi speaking, "and she said, 'See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law.' But Ruth said, 'Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you.' And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more." That's Ruth chapter 1, 15 to 18. A couple of things I want to point out about this passage. The first is that it does not start in a really happy place, okay? First of all, there's a famine in the land. And because our economy in this country where we live is not really an agricultural economy, we don't understand the devastating effect that a famine could have. But these people lived an agricultural lifestyle, and for there to be a famine was a major, major issue. It meant that people were going to die of hunger, and that people are going to go without. And it was going to be very, very difficult. So this starts out in a bad place. That's why Elimelech's family had to leave the promised land and go to Moab, as they were looking for a place where they could survive. And it doesn't get much better when they get there. Yes, their sons find wives, and I guess that's the good part, but Elimelech dies, and eventually both of his sons die. And what this means is that these three women, Naomi, Orpah, and Ruth, were facing some very, very serious hardships. Because at this time, in the history of the world, and women couldn't sustain themselves. They couldn't work. They basically went from being just a normal family to being destitute by the death of these three men. They had no one to take care of them. And they were facing real hardship. So this does not start, the book of Ruth does not start out in a very happy place. It actually starts out in a very difficult place with some very difficult things happening to these people. What I want you to see is that Naomi recognizes this. She recognizes this. And if you read the book of Ruth, and I encourage you to do it because it's not very long, Naomi recognizes this, that this is a really bitter, this is a bad hand they've been dealt. This is a bitter pill to swallow. And she even tells Orpah and Ruth, go back to your people. Go back to your father's house, to your hometowns. Find someone there. Marry them. Go and live a life that will make you happy. I will not be happy. My sons have died. My husband has died. Everything has gone bad for me. And Orpah takes her advice and goes. And we don't hold that against Orpah in any way. But Ruth refuses to. And it says something about Ruth. When she says, I'm going to go where you go. I'm going to lodge where you lodge. I'm going to, your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. When she says these things, remember that she is not an Israelite. Right? She married into this Israelite family. She did not worship the God of the Scriptures. And she says these things. It ought to, if we've been paying attention to our Bible, remind us of a couple of times where God spoke and the way that God spoke about His people. In Genesis 28:15, God is talking to Jacob. And this is what God says. He says, behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Does not that sound a lot like what Ruth says to Naomi? In other words, one of the things that we can see here is that the Bible, the writer of the book of Ruth, and the Scriptures are asking us to see Ruth's character is similar to that of God's. The way that Ruth speaks is she is speaking the language and the way that God speaks to His people. And that's a huge thing, especially for an Israelite to hear, because Ruth, again, is not an Israelite. And so you can tell, you would expect a book called Ruth to be focused on Ruth, right? I mean, but just remember that it didn't have a title at the time that it was written. I just want you to see the subversive nature of this book in the Bible, that it's just dropped in here, and we have this woman who is not raised in a household of God and not steeped in the Scriptures, and yet when she speaks to this destitute mother-in-law of hers, she speaks like God speaks to His children. And that should cause us, that should ping on our radar. That should cause us to examine more closely what's going on here. So that's the first thing I want you to see. I want you to see that it starts out in a very difficult place. That Ruth starts out in a very difficult place. But also the way that Ruth speaks is reminding us of the way that God speaks to His children. Now the second thing I want you to see about Ruth is that I've already underscored that she's not an Israelite. But I want you to see that the Scriptures are setting her up to be an example of what a faithful woman looks like in the Scriptures. Remember, we haven't had a woman be a central character of the Bible since Eve, really. I mean, we've had people, we've had Abraham and Sarah, we've had Leah and Rachel, we've had different people, we've had Rahab, we've had different people, there are different judges in the Bible, right, that are female, like Deborah. But really, like, to be the center point of the story, like Eve is in the temptation in Genesis 3, it's not really happened a lot. So Ruth already stands out as different, but there's something that you might not even notice if you were looking at your Bible about this, about the book of Ruth, is that In our Bibles, it goes, we're following the English Bible order. So it's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, right? But that's not how the Hebrew Bible was organized, okay? And the reason that Ruth is where it is in our Bible is because what we read in Ruth chapter 1, where it says, in the time when judges ruled over Israel. So chronologically, this is where Ruth belongs. But in the Hebrew Bible, Ruth comes after Proverbs. Ruth is the book right after Proverbs. And it's very interesting that that's the way it would be, because Proverbs ends with a very important passage in Proverbs 31, where it says, an excellent wife who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. Proverbs 31:10. And this is a verse that many, many Christian women know and have heard about, because this is a time where where the Bible underscores the importance of finding a godly wife. This is a mother speaking to her son and talking about how important it is that he choose a godly wife. And Proverbs 31 is held up and as a model, an impossible model to ever follow, because the woman that's described in Proverbs 31 is technically sinless, or it seems like it's that way. But it's held up as this woman who is of inestimable value, because she is the best possible wife to her husband and the best possible mother to her children. And I want you to see, and this is so interesting in the Hebrew Bible, is that Proverbs 31 ends with that, an excellent wife who can find. And then Ruth begins in the Hebrew Bible with Ruth. Where is this excellent wife found? She's not found in the Promised Land. She's found in Moab. She doesn't even worship our gods. What is going on here? And there's a lesson for us here, an important lesson, which is this, is that God can use anyone. And this is something that it took a long time for the Israelite people to understand. And it still takes us a long time to understand, is that God is not dependent on us. We are dependent on Him, and He can use anyone. And no one in this time, in the time of the judges, would have said, you know where the perfect example of a godly woman resides? She resides in Moab. And no one would have said that. But what this book does is it shows us that God can call anyone out of anywhere, right? And we should have known that already by God calling a people, Abraham, or calling the people out of Egypt, or Jacob, or whoever, Rahab, whoever you want to list in the Bible and say, oh wow, it's amazing that God used them. But yet again, God is saying to us, even by the way that the Bible was organized in these days, the Hebrew Old Testament, is that God can use anybody. That the ground is level at the foot of the cross, and that Ruth stands as an example that there's no one that's too far gone. There's no education requirement or ethnic requirement or racial requirement, or that God can literally use anyone to advance His kingdom. And that ought to be a real comfort to us, right? That ought to be a real comfort to us. It's very common for everyone is proud of where they've come from, right? Everyone is proud of their hometown, no matter how terrible their hometown is. They're proud of it. They're allowed to talk about how terrible their hometown is. You are not allowed to talk about it, right? As an outsider. But the insider, everyone is proud, no matter where they are. And what that does, what the effect that has on us is often is that we internalize that, and we tend to think that someone's got to come from my people in order to really be something. And Ruth really speaks against that mentality, right? Ruth is an absolute outsider. She is an absolute outsider in every way. And guess what? She is the one that God is going to use to advance His kingdom. So, very important thing to understand. You would never guess that, because in our Bible, Ruth is after Judges, but in the Hebrew Bible, Ruth is after Proverbs, and that's important because the Scriptures are saying something about what it means to follow God, and that a follower of God can come from anywhere. So, that's the second thing I want you to see. The next section of Scripture is where Ruth meets Boaz. This is Ruth chapter 2, verses 8 through 13. I'm going to read it to you. It says, Then Boaz said to Ruth, Now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping, and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn. Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? But Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to the people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Then she said, "I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants." All right, well, that's Ruth chapter 2, verses 8 through 13. In TV shows, this is called the meet cute. This is when, there's an actual term for it. It's when the two romantic interests meet each other for the first time, and it's usually like a kind of a cute little thing that happens, or a quirky thing in a way in which they meet. When Jim and Pam, get together, or when on The Office, or wherever, whatever show you want to talk about, that they write this into television, into movies. They expect this is it's called a trope or a meme even. But I want you to see something about Boaz and Ruth. We know, because if you've read Ruth, you know that Ruth and Boaz are going to end up getting together. But what I want you to notice, because this is so important, is what Boaz notices about Ruth. All right? I want to remind you that we're not given a physical description of Ruth at all. We're not told that she is beautiful. We're also not told that she is ugly. We're not even told that she's just, somewhere in between those things, although I guess she'd have to be. We're not told anything about her, about what she looks like, other than she is clearly not an Israelite. And so she might stand out culturally. She might stand out ethnically. I don't know. Okay? We don't know that. But what we do know, and this is often the case in the Bible, because we don't know what a lot of the people in the Bible look like, is that we do know what people are like by how they speak and what they do. Their actions and their words are what reveal their character in the Scriptures. We know that Saul was tall, but we don't know a lot. We know that David was ruddy. We know a couple of things about the physical description of people, right? But how we really know people is by their words and by their actions, what they reveal. And I want you to notice that that's exactly what Boaz knows about Ruth, right? When Ruth says, "Why would you be so kind to me and let me glean from your fields?" Why would you do that? Boaz says, "Because it has been told to me what you have done." In other words, what impressed Boaz about Ruth was her character. Her character is what impressed him. The fact that she was willing to leave the people and the place that she knew the best and to stay with her mother-in-law and to take care of her and to pledge herself to her, that said something to Boaz about what kind of person Ruth was. And there's an important lesson in there for us about when we are judging people. We are very quick to judge people based upon appearances, upon culture, upon ethnicity, upon whatever it is. We're very quick to do that, right? It says, I think that it takes less than a second for most people to make a first impression or make up their mind about someone, whether they're going to like them or dislike them. And it's based almost all on external things. But what really matters is the heart, right? What really matters is the heart. And you can see here is that what Boaz was impressed with about Ruth was her character. And we ought to think long and hard about the kind of people that we want to date and to marry, using Ruth and Boaz as an example. That the kind of people that we want to date and the kind of people that we want to marry are the kind of people that we're impressed with their character, because character doesn't go away. A lot of other things, including, and I know it's going to be hard for you to realize this because you're young and you can't imagine yourself being old, but I'm 40, right? And I too sat there like you and listened to a Sunday school teacher and thought, well, I'm never going to be old. And look, somehow I am. It happened day by day. And all this, your youth fades, your athleticism fades, your beauty fades, according to some, whatever it is, all those things fade. But what Ruth has and what Boaz is attracted to in Ruth is something that does not fade, which is a trust in God and a character that, plays out that trust in God. So I want you to notice that. The second thing I want you to notice, and this is also really important, and this is about Boaz, is that Boaz is fulfilling a commandment that the people of God were not always very good about fulfilling, which is this, that there would be kindness to the stranger in your land. Ruth is a refugee. Okay? Ruth is a refugee. She has left, hard circumstances in Moab with her mother-in-law and come back, and she is in a place that is not her home. And Boaz shows kindness to her. He shows kindness to her because she is a stranger, right? And he knows something about her, but he also shows kindness to a stranger. And this is important. This is the character requirement for those who would follow God, is that we would be kind to those who don't belong, or who feel like they don't belong. And that doesn't have to mean someone who has moved from a different town. That can just be someone who doesn't seem to have as many friends as you do, or doesn't seem to be as socially adept as you are, or maybe is a little bit awkward, or maybe is a little bit quiet, or whatever it is, okay? Or maybe goes to a different school than you go to, or or lives in a different part of town than you live in, or whatever it is, right? That we are called, if we're going to follow Christ, we are called to show kindness to those who are strangers, who are new, who are alien, who are different, who are entering into our context, and maybe they aren't always there. They don't necessarily feel at home. And that's a very important lesson for us to see. God is constantly commanding His people to do that. They're constantly sometimes they're doing a really bad job of it. But we can't miss it here. Is that Boaz is letting Ruth, a stranger, a Moabitess, I guess, a foreigner, glean his fields. And we should pay attention to that. We should pay attention to his kindness to strangers. Because remember that we were strangers, right? We were strangers and estranged from God, and Jesus Christ came and was kind to us and loved us and died for us so that we might be a part of the family. So, another important thing to notice from the book of Ruth. All right, our last section of Ruth is Ruth chapter 4, verses 13 through 17. And this is where Boaz and Ruth start a family. Let's read it together. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer. And may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. So here's what I want you to see as we finish up Ruth, is that remember that this book begins with famine and despair and death. And where it ends is with a new child and hope and happiness and the promise of a future king, right? Ruth, who was not an Israelite, her son is Obed, who is David's grandfather. So she is the great-grandmother of the king, the great king of Israel, David. You see this. Ruth was an outsider, and she is brought in. Naomi was bitter, and everything was taken from her, and now everything has been restored, and she's been redeemed. In every way, this book goes from really bad setting to really good setting. It's a storybook ending, right? Here's what I want you to see about that, is that God was in control at all times. Now, at the end, it's easy to say, oh, look, God was in control and everything worked out for good. What I want you to see is that in the beginning, when there was despair, and also at the end, when there is hope, that in both situations and everywhere in between, God is in control. It's easy to believe that God's in control and everything is going well. It is more difficult to believe it when things are not going so well. But it's important for us, it's probably more important for us to remember that God is in control in those times when things are hard than when things are easy. It's important for us to remember that when things are going well too, lest we become prideful and think that everything we have is ours and not from God. But it's also important for us to remember that when things are hard, when things are difficult, when things do not go the way that we wanted them to go, is that God's in control, that He is working all things to establish and to expand His kingdom in this world. And He knew that He was going to pull Ruth out of Moab and make her, the great-grandmother of King David. He knew He was going to do that the whole time. Elimelech, Naomi, the people of Bethlehem, all these, the people of Moab, they didn't know it. They couldn't see it from God's perspective, but God could see it. And it's important for us to remember that God sees these things from His perspective and not from ours. It's important for us to remember that. But even more important than that is this, is that what we see here is God is pointing us, He's giving us a hint of the ultimate child of promise. Right? Obed, this child that's born, is a child of promise that gives hope to these people. He's born in Bethlehem. I want to point that out to you. He's born in Bethlehem. And he's this child. And again, it's not like an overt thing where they're saying, look, Jesus is coming. They're not saying it like that, but they are kind of saying it. The scriptures are pointing to Jesus and saying, look, here is a child of hope that brought hope to some people who are in despair, right? And a kingly child that's born in Bethlehem, right? And we should be, that our ears should prick up, right? We should be paying attention to that, because this is, again, the whole Bible points to Jesus Christ. This is yet another example where at first when you read it, you think, what does that have to do with Jesus? But when you pay closer attention, especially after Christ has come, you look back at Ruth and you say, yet again, God was hinting at what He was going to do, right? This is the importance of biblical theology and about reading the whole Bible, is that you can see in the light of Christ how Obed and the story of Ruth and the story of Boaz prefigure the story of Jesus, the story of Mary and Joseph, and about another child being born, a child of promise, the ultimate child of promise. So I don't want you to miss that as well. What are our takeaways? Well, our takeaways is this. First of all, God can use anyone from anywhere. All right? Second of all, God is in control no matter what. In good times and in bad times, that at all times, God's in control. Thirdly, I guess I'm getting these out of order because this is really point number 2, but that what people knew about Ruth is that she was that she loved her mother-in-law, and that her character was what mattered. And fourthly, which really should have been thirdly, is that Boaz showed kindness to a stranger, and we're called to show kindness to a stranger. Lastly, and most importantly, this story points us to the ultimate child of promise, who is Jesus Christ, born in Bethlehem, just like Obed, a child from the line of David who delivers his people, not just from famine, but from their sin, and ultimately into the household of God. So those are our takeaways for today. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to sign up for RYM, and we will see you next week.